welcome back to We Just Want a Podcast. I'm Liana.
I'm Carol.
And I'm Donna.
Woo-hoo. All right. So it's been another week and here comes another episode. So I just want to kind of start things off by Carol, welcome back. We missed you.
Carol, love you.
I know, we missed you so much. How was your brain
Thanks.
surgery?
It was good. The AVM is officially out of my brain, so that's great news, and it won't grow back. So I won't have to do another brain surgery, hopefully ever again. But yeah, the recovery process so far has been good. Still a lot of pain, but or not a lot of pain, but pain here and there. But it's less frequent day by day. So I remember like post-surgery, right when I woke up, I was like in major pain and kind of like loopy from all the anesthesia. So I was dealing with that. And then like I also wasn't eating well. So it was really hard for me to take pain medication or even like other medication that the hospital was giving me. So that was really hard to deal with. And then once I got discharged and stayed at my parents' house for a little bit, they fed me like more like Asian food or more light food, because in the hospital it's like the same food all the time. And it's very heavy food. But then once I got home, like my dad was making like porridge with fish in it, so it was more light to my stomach, so that way I can actually like keep it in my body. So yeah, so far so good. There's still a couple weeks left in my recovery process, and I still have a follow-up appointment with my surgeon, but right now all things are good, so I'm excited. And then those who are watching YouTube, you'll see that I have a different background, and that's because I have moved back to my home, not my parents' house anymore. So it's good to be back and get some normalcy.
Good to have you back, for sure.
Yes,
I know.
missed you.
I know it was like a crazy brain operation. So I mean, you look great. So
Thanks.
What was it, Donna? You said Carol was a badass.
Carol is forever a badass, everyone. I think everyone knows that already.
Oh, thank you. I think you just kind of have to deal with it, because otherwise it's either you're optimistic or pessimistic. And I chose to be optimistic because I'm like, at least I'm still alive and I can still do things normally. Other than my hair half bald, that's my hat's hiding. Everything's still back to normal. I can still like do the normal walk and talk. And they were really worried that I like couldn't walk for a while, but I got a walker and I didn't even need to use it. So it's great.
Wow.
That's what you call big brain energy, people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just glad it's all over. The last 3 months has been really crazy for me, but yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's really good to have you back. Okay, so let's dive in, shall we? So for this week's episode, we have actually kind of been nervous to kind of have this conversation, but we wanted to give it a shot. So we will be talking about the topic of race. And to do that, we actually have been educating ourselves and decided to read this book called So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. Yes. Donna is actually holding it up in case you wanted to take a look, and we'll make sure to link the book as well. But Donna, you had a friend who actually introduced us to this book.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to learn a little bit more. My friend actually gave me a link to this Black-owned bookshop. It's called the Lip Bar Bookstore and Chill. It's pretty cool. It's Black-owned. They ship it to you. It was pretty fast. I got 2 books, this and an Angela Davis book, but it's really cool to kind of like see other artists, and like a lot of my friends have been ordering from them too. So holla at them. It's called the Lit Bar Bookstore and Chill.
Nice. Yeah, I actually checked them up too, and yeah, they're super cute, and they even have curated lists based on the topic that you want to read about as well. Okay, so just a little context here. Ijeoma is actually a writer and speaker whose work on race has been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, Elle, The Guardian, and more. She has twice been named to the Route 100 and received the 2018 Feminist Humanist Award from the American Humanist Society. So I gotta admit, when I first kind of read the little description in the back of the book, it seemed really relevant to today's times because she just kind of gives us a little bit of guidance to talk about everyday race topics. And I mean, this is a really heavy issue. And I know for the past few months, it's been very emotionally charged. And of course, my heart felt very heavy. And even within the three of us, we had to jump on multiple calls and like, how exactly do we go about this? So we've read the first three chapters of the book, and we'll kind of go guide our conversation around that, as well as there was a chapter on the model minority myth. And I thought that was especially pertaining to us because Carol, Donna, and myself are actually Asian Americans. So yeah, and I guess I do want to say like we might mess up, but this is us trying, and yeah, just us trying to have this very difficult conversation.
Yeah, I just want to add that this book is a really good book to start a conversation about race because it does go into how you can talk to people about race or how to approach the conversation where you may, mess up, but it's okay to talk about it and you just got to keep trying. And I think the more you talk about it, the more comfortable you'll be in talking about it, which is one of the things I was worried about, just talking about race and making sure that I don't say the wrong thing. So it was really good to read that from a perspective of someone on the other side.
And I think this book is also kind of structured where you learn about it, you learn like the surface of it, you kind of dig deep, and at the end you kind of learn like what to do with it or what to do with that information you now know. But yeah, let's get it.
Let's get it. Okay, so all right, so Ijeoma does a really good job on kind of putting in the foundations of race. And the first chapter is actually about, or the title is it really about race? I know I remember whenever I have conversations with, other people of color, or when they kind of say like, guys, like this was a racist remark, like I'm like, is it really? Because it seems so hard hitting. You're like, are you sure that's a really serious thing to kind of throw to someone, or a serious allegation? So Ijeoma actually kind of says, yes, if it fits these criterias, it is about race. Do one of you guys kind of want to go through that criteria?
So the basics are: one, it is about race if a person of color thinks it is about race. Number two, it is about race if it is disproportionately or differently affects people of color. And number three, it is about race if it fits into broader patterns of events that disproportionately or differently affects people of color.
Yeah. What do you guys think about that?
I think she said something along the books where even if it's about nothing, it's still about race. And I think like that also kind of takes into effect where you might not think like on the surface level it's about race, but it really is. And it's kind of where you are. And she talks about poverty in one part of the book too, and how that affects also, and how even though like our socioeconomics, we can't really do anything from the beginning, but the whole part of that like idea started with race too.
Yeah, no, I agree, Jana. So Ijeoma kind of gave this great analogy. For example, when a store clerk is following a Black man or woman around the store, even though maybe the clerk didn't have any purposeful intention of like, oh, like I'm just following because I'm overeager, or like there's been a lot of like shoplifting recently and I didn't realize that because he was a Black man, me following him was racially motivated. So Ijeoma kind of says race is your identity. Like if you have colored skin, you can't take it off, and no matter what your intention was, it's still really race motivated or race underlined. So that kind of was like a aha moment. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. No matter what your intention, race is a part of us.
I think even then they talk about how, you know, there are still successful. I want to say, like how she said, there are successful Black people and there are unsuccessful white people, but the number of occurrence that it keeps happening to the same amount of people, that's where it kind of gets like questionable of how our society is, how our government is, how we're kind of are put already in like that bubble in a way. Not we, but also just like Black people in general. But how, and then how we're kind of reacting to that too. How we'll say, but well, someone's successful, but you know, we want all of them to be successful too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that because I think the example where she says like, oh, how is poverty about race if like Oprah exists or like successful Black people exist? The fact that they have to mention specific people that are successful, it kind of defeats the purpose that like the fact that you have to bring up examples of people shows that it's like not it's less common that people or Black people are successful than white people. And like, and for even for like on, if you like reverse the argument, or not reverse the argument but reverse the example piece of like white people being successful, you don't have to really name white people being successful because there's a lot more examples of white people being successful than Black people being successful. And the fact that you have to even name examples, it already shows the inequality of it. Yeah, and
Okay.
then I also like the analogy that she had of, you know, walking down the street and every few minutes someone would punch you in the arm, and then to the point where like you lash out at the latest person who would punch your arm, because like people don't really realize that, you know, someone could make like a racist joke and think like it's a joke, because especially if it's like a close relationship, but you don't know what goes in people's minds or what people have experienced where that could be triggering to someone to do something like that. But to you, being the person who punches the other person, you don't think about like what that person experienced and what they have gone through. So I do really like that example of
Yeah.
that is related to race, because we really don't know what people have gone through, and we can't assume that just because we think something is a joke means that that other person would take it as a joke too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like I love her analogies because it made me so much easier to understand. I think there's like a actual term for that, which is like microaggression. Um, and like for example, like what you thought that oh, it was just one tiny joke, like stop being so sensitive. And
Mm-hmm.
then but what if the other person's like, no dude, like I've heard this a million times before and you were my last straw. You
Mm-hmm.
might think that it was like no big deal, but for a person of color, this is their lived experience.
Yeah.
um, and you might have made that joke just to make yourself feel comfortable, but you're doing it at the expense of another person.
I think like following that part, like that analogy in the book, she said something like race is more than just pain and oppression, it's also culture and history. So
Mm.
like
Mm-hmm.
with race, it's also another story behind it too, and it's more than just like the bad side of it, but it's like the culture, the fashion, the food, and all of that too.
Yeah, no, I really like that part too, where she's like, there's this ugly side, but us humans are so resilient anyway that they are able to kind of turn something really beautiful, which is, like you mentioned, Donna, their culture, their music, their fashion. They turn their pain into something that everybody can enjoy. Okay, so what else did you guys think of this chapter when she's asking the readers, is it really about race?
It's kind of hard for me to say because from my own personal experience, I haven't really dealt with racism that much, just because like throughout my childhood, I was always surrounded by Asian Americans, and I've always been like kind of like the majority of or I was always part of the majority of the group in my neighborhoods because everyone around me was Asian. So I've
Mm-hmm.
never personally dealt with it. And so when I read this chapter, like I couldn't really relate because I didn't have those experiences of being like racist against for my race. But I do see where she's coming from because I hear about it all the time, whether it's in the news or about people's experience. So just because I personally have not gone through racism against my own race doesn't mean that it doesn't exist for other people. So um, it's good hearing it from a perspective of someone who like has gone through it because I
Yeah,
haven't.
it really kind of forces you to empathize because it's like reading a story of a friend. Like this is actually a friend reaching out to you and saying, "This is what's happening to me."
I kind of like in both sides where I think because well, there was one time I forgot what city it was in, but it was like a predominantly white city, and then kind of the same thing where I was a little bit followed around. I think because I was still probably like 19, and I they probably think I wasn't really gonna buy anything. So they did follow me around, and then once like another white family came, I think this was like at the hat club or something like that. It was like a hat store, and then when a white family finally came, like the workers were all attentive to them, and then when I finally wanted to purchase something, they didn't really want to pay attention to me anymore. So they kind of ignored me. I don't know if that was about race, but they definitely did not. They paid attention to me when I was just walking around looking at everything, but when I finally wanted to buy something or when I needed help, they were not attentive at all because they thought I wasn't gonna buy anything anyway. I had a lot of kind of like a lot of black friends growing up in East Side San Jose, and I remember one of my aunts was like, "Oh, why are you friends with with black people?" And I'm like, "Wait, what's wrong with that? Like, what's I don't see anything bad with that." And that's when I kind of saw like how people were treating them too. And then so when they were telling me about their stories, how about them growing up, and how like those type of comments are so like instilled in them, like they hear those comments all the time. I was kind of like dumbfounded at a pretty young age, 4 5 6, of how people kind of look at them just based on their skin. And that's where I kind of have empathy for them and standing up for them when people make those dumb comments to them too.
Yeah, I mean, you start to realize you're actually freaking exposed to this when you're young, and it's true when hate is taught and like how it doesn't make sense to you until you get older. Like I'm sure when you were 4 or 5 years old, Donna, you're like you said, you were dumbfounded. You're like, I don't know how to react to this. It's not till you get older you're like, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, I highlighted the last paragraph of the chapter, and this is what it says. If you are a person of color, know this. The world will try to tell you that what you are seeing, hearing, thinking, and feeling is wrong. The world will tell you that you do not know how to interpret what is happening to you and to your community. But you're not wrong, and you have just as much right to be heard and believed as anybody else. If you think it's about race, you are right. So it's just her kind of finishing it off with a strong statement like, this is your experience, this is what you're feeling, and it's valid, and you deserve to be heard. So for me, what that meant for me, it's like, if anybody ever reaches out to me saying like, this is what happened to me, I don't like, it's fucked up, like help me, what I can do is just to kind of provide a safe space for that person.
Yeah, and I think like for me, it's your opinion of something or your experience of that thing is never invalidated. Like you have the right to say your story, be heard, and for people to silence you, that's more fucked up too, man. Your story deserves to be heard.
Okay, so how are we doing, guys? Should we go on to the next chapter?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So the second chapter is titled, What is Racism? She kind of opened the book with like a story of how she had an argument with a coworker and how like the coworker was saying, if I need a drug test to get a hardworking job, you should have one to get the free stuff my hardworking tax dollars are paying for. And the coworker is referring to the people who are taking advantage of the welfare system and like how she wants them to be sterilized. And Ijeoma was saying that like no dude, like if poor people are sterilized because they're poor, that's already kind of undermining them where they're already being oppressed. So, and Ijeoma kind of said, like, I've been working with this coworker for how many years now, and I didn't realize that she was capable of being racist. And then she goes to a confidant, a white male friend, and she says, this is fucking racist. but the white male friend was like, whoa, Ijeoma, like chill. Are you sure it was about racism? And then that's when Ijeoma kind of realized with this friend, it's not safe to go to him anymore because she can't be her true authentic self when she can't be genuine about her struggles. So what did you guys think?
There was a part about book, like, I don't know if she said, like, that there's a problem about race if we can't even know what the true definition of what racism is. I was like, oof, yes, because, like, let me see if I can
Yeah.
find it.
No, I agree. It's on page 26.
Okay, yeah.
Because there's two definitions that she names, and then she said if you define racism by this definition, then you're like, this is not the right book for you, blah blah blah. So I actually definitely agree with that because I feel like everyone has their own definition of racism and what racism is, and because everyone doesn't have the same definition, like it's hard to tell like what is actually racism or what is actually racist when you like have that experience. So I definitely agree with that portion of where she says, so the two definitions was, one is racism is any prejudice against someone because of their race, or two, racism is any prejudice against someone because of their race when those views are reinforced by systems of power. So I think that's the whole argument with the last few months, because what people are so angry about is, the police brutality, but also because like the system has also suppressed people of color because they're people of color.
Yeah, and she also made the argument of like it's really, really easy to point the finger to someone who's racist when, they're posting memes of like, for example, Obama being a monkey, or, Steve down the street saying fuck black lives or something. It's very easy to point that out, but chances are they're not the ones who are inflicting the big hurt or like really oppressing the people. It's more like those little tiny nuances of like you said, like it's by systems of power. For example, if you have a black sounding name, you're not getting hired, or if you're a person of color and your teacher doesn't think that you're capable of more. So it's those little tiny quiet um,
Microaggressions.
harmful, yeah, microaggressions
Mm-hmm.
that are hard to
It's like very
recognize.
subtle. Yeah. It's very
Mm-hmm.
subtle, but it's like it's definitely like racially motivated. Like you would think that you're doing one thing because of whatever reason that may not be racially motivated, but all in all it is because of race that you're making that statement.
Okay, so I also really liked this quote from her on page 31. And I hope for our readers who don't have this book, I hope this is kind of useful, because at the same time, like I don't want to put words into her mouth. So I like to read quotes because the way that this book is written is really beautifully said. So, anyways, this is the quote. We can get every person in America to feel nothing but love for people of color in their hearts. But if our systems are acknowledged and changed, it will bring negligible benefit to the lives of people of color. So for me, what that meant is like, I don't consider myself as a racist. I'm like, I love people of all color. I treat them equally. But that love, that emotional feeling that I have doesn't do shit, is what she's saying. Um, she said that like, unless we want to see change happen, we need to first have tough conversations of what we're doing now, but also actually bring action to it. And that was like, yeah, another aha moment. And I'm like, it's not enough for me to be like, I'm not racist. I'm good. I'm not contributing. And that's where the term anti-racist comes in, and where it really started to make sense to me.
Yeah, and then in that quote, she says the word systems, and she used that word to kind of demonstrate systematic racism. And then she says that it's a machine that runs whether we pull the levers or not, by just letting it be. We're responsible for what it produces. So like for it to be keep going and going, that's a systematic racism that we let it go through, and
It's
And then if you
systemic
could,
racism, not
systemic
systematic.
racism. Sorry,
Yeah, not systematic.
my
It's
bad.
there are different
Systemic.
definitions.
Yes, my bad. Systemic racism.
Yeah, no, I actually highlighted the same quote, Donna, and I like the last sentence is like, we have to actually dismantle the machine if we want to make change. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'm like, me against the machine, holy fuck. You're like, can I? Like, it's kind
Yeah.
of overwhelming sometimes too.
But what does dismantle the machine mean? Like, is there any specific ways or like?
Yeah, I think that she gave really specific examples of like, for example, if your coworker made a racist remarks, and you know, of course it's really easy to report him or her to HR and be like, and get them in trouble, but it also, for a more deeper layer of change that we can help facilitate, is like asking the company, what other practices are you using to make sure that racism or discrimination doesn't exist in the workplace? What does your executive board looks like? What does your managers or leadership look like? Like, you ask deeper questions where it's really easy to blame just one person, but your voice still matters to attack the bigger systems of power. All right, guys, so we're on to the third chapter of the book, and the third chapter is titled, What If I Talk About Race Wrong? And I thought this was super relevant, because especially for our podcast, because we're over here kind of nervous. um, so yeah, what did you guys think? What did you guys learn from this chapter?
I am definitely someone who really needed this chapter because I myself am always afraid of like saying the wrong thing when it comes to race. So, like, I think nowadays we do need to talk more about race when it affects a lot of people, especially if it's disproportionately affecting certain races. So, I really definitely need this chapter. Um, I think the point of us talking about race more will make us more comfortable to talk about race. I agree with that because if you're so scared of saying the wrong thing and then therefore you don't talk about it, then how will you ever not be scared of it, right? Um, I think the more we talk about race or have open conversations, the more comfortable we'll be at talking to people. But of course, like, you know, if you're afraid, start at a safe space, like with your close friends or people that you know that won't judge you, and then kind of start off there. And then every time you do say something wrong, like acknowledge that that you didn't know and that you will learn better. And then over time, I think it'll be more and more comfortable to talk about race. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, she blatantly just said, "You're going to screw this up. Like this conversation will go sideways, ups and downs. It's gonna suck. It's gonna hurt, but the conversation is gonna happen. It needs to happen. So, one step up for us for trying to have this conversation."
Yeah,
Yeah, and
and
you everyone learns from their mistakes, right? So the more mistakes you make talking about it, the less mistakes you'll make in the future of or the same mistakes at least.
no, Carol, you weren't the only one that was nervous about this either. I was nervous too. Um, and to our readers out there, like, though you might, though we might seem like we're comfortable right now, or it took us a few calls, like I said, offline, to kind of see like where we're at, how we're feeling, and checking in with each other, and just providing that safe space for each other first. And that, even if you just have one listening ear, and that makes all the difference. But Ijoma actually kind of give us like bullet points as to how to have a productive conversation. And I'll just kind of quickly go through them if that's okay. So number one is to always state your intentions firsthand. So our intention with this episode is just to kind of say, like, we're here for the hard conversations as well. I mean, the description says doing life together, and hard conversations are a part of life, and it's not the most comfortable thing. But you know, having a group of friends or family members like you guys, like, it makes a huge difference, and this is a really necessary conversation. 2 is to remember what your top priority in the conversation is and don't let your emotions override that. Do you guys want to read the rest? Like, we can take turns, actually.
Number
Yeah.
3 is do your research. So obviously, read everything as much as you can. Us doing this book is already doing like part of the research. Number 4 is don't make your anti-racism argument oppressive against other groups.
5 is when you start to feel defensive, stop and ask yourself why. 6, do not tone police. This one I didn't really get, but you guys can explain it to me if you guys understand it better. 7, if you are white, watch how many times you say I and me.
And the last 2 is ask yourself, am I trying to be right or am I trying to do better? And lastly, do not force people of color into discussions of race. Yeah, so again, to our readers, please get this book. It's really great. But I guess to your question earlier, Carol, my understanding of that point of do not tone police is just don't require people to make a hard conversation comfortable for you. Like maybe like don't attack them based on their tone. Like, oh, why are you talking to me that way? Like, just be there to listen and, like you said, to learn and try to do better. Because if your intention is right in the first place, which is to make this world a better place for everybody equally, then you have to listen to the hurt, and it's gonna get uncomfortable.
I definitely agree with the point of doing your research, because I know a lot of people would think they have done the research, but and then they would talk about like what makes sense to them. But for me, like if I don't do my research, I have a hard time not having a stance on it because I just don't know enough. And so sometimes my education is, listening to other people who I know have done the research, or even just doing the research myself before putting a stance out there. A lot of people may say, oh, this sounds right, so I'm going to go for it. But then sometimes, like, what sounds right may not always be right. So doing your research will help you understand the facts of what is factually right or wrong.
And then the number 8 point was when you talk about race, are you doing it to be right? Are you doing it to be better? I think when you get in that conversation, what people think like, oh, what I'm talking about is, real, or if I'm talking about is who I am, but are they doing it just to be the bigger person, or are they trying to be like the bigger man itself, like physically and mentally, just trying to eat your decisions up?
And sometimes you're going to have many parts of the same conversation in different times or days, right? So don't always think that you need to solve everything by just one conversation. It's always going to be something that you're going to have to come back to, so that way you feel by each conversation you're feeling more and more comfortable talking about race. Especially when people start getting defensive or start getting emotional. It's like, oh, why are you attacking me? Or like, I feel offended, blah blah blah. It's like, it's not really like judging by someone's character, but just like, if it starts going down the line of like emotions are way too high, then you kind of have to step back or take a break and then come back to it when you can have a more productive conversation. So I definitely agree with that.
So Ijeoma also kind of talked about like how to fail smartly. And to segue off of what you just said, Carol, it's like the first point that she said is to stop trying to jump back in when a conversation is beyond saving, meaning, like you said, when it's emotionally charged and everybody is upset, it's really important to stop trying to have a resolution at the end. And I know it can be hard to walk away from something when you feel so strongly. But she's just saying, like you said, like you have to step back and come back when it's more productive.
And then like that kind of like jumps into like point 2, where once you acknowledge you did something wrong, just apologize for that mistake. Especially if you have to really mean it just to make that apology, be truthful. But yeah, that's really cool. And then I guess I'll just finish off reading the points. So these are the tips when your conversation on race has gone very wrong. So once, don't stop trying to jump the conversation. Number 2 was apologize. Number 3 is don't write your synopsis of this conversation as the time you got yelled at. Number 4 was don't insist that people give you credit for your intentions. Number 5 was don't beat yourself up. And number 6 is remember that it is worth the risk and commit to trying again.
And I think there was another quote where she says, "You're not the only one who's nervous, and you will not be the only one taking a risk." So this is what we're doing. It's like taking a risk, and these conversations will be hard, but it's because it's always about the hurt and pain of real people. And we're talking about our identities and our histories and the ways in which these are used and exploited to elevate and oppress. These conversations will always be emotional and loaded to various degrees, and if they are not, then you are likely not having the right conversation. So yeah, but thanks, I guess, to our listeners for even giving us the opportunity and listening to this. And if you guys ever want to talk offline, please reach out to us. We're down to talk. All right, so on to our last chapter that we've read so far. This is the chapter on the model minority myth. What did you guys think?
So there was a part where Ijeoma talked about, when she was fighting for, or when she started fighting for racial inequality, Asian Americans were not on her mind. And then when she was fighting for economic justice, Asian Americans were, again, not on her mind. And I think that kind of says a lot to me, because the whole model minority myth, if you like take it word for word, like Asian Americans are still technically, not technically, they are considered minorities. But then when you add the word model to it, it makes it sound like we're like the top tier of the minorities. And with that being said, a lot of people would not really think about, or when they think of racial injustice, they don't think about, Asian Americans as part of that group that is being injustice towards. So I definitely agree with that point. And I think to this day, um, because of the stereotypes that, Asian people are hardworking, they get into good schools, they care about, science and math, all those stereotypes, it makes people think that like we don't really face racism because of the stereotypes that we have, when in fact there are people that are still racist to Asian Americans or Asian people in general.
My thing that I kind of resonated with was she says Asians are more than just like East Asians of Japanese, Korean, Chinese. There's Southeast Asians, there's South Asians, there's Pacific Islanders, there's Middle East. Like people are only kind of bubbling us into one category or like one area of Asia, where Asia is made up of so many different cultures, so many different like cultures, countries, and all that too.
It's really easy like for people to lump us up together, but I have a feeling that whenever people think about Asians, they're only thinking about East Asians. So those are like the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Chinese, but the rest of us kind of gets left behind or not really come first to mind.
Yeah, because when you think about like Indians or Middle Easterns, you say Indian American or Middle Eastern Americans. You don't say they're Asian, but technically they're part of Asia too.
Yeah, and it's really divisive. The like it says, it's a myth. We're not. It divides us from the rest of the minority groups when that's what white supremacy wants to do. Like they just want us to be divided and think that like, oh, just because they think, do you think you guys are really that better than us? And then we're clashing with each other when we should be banding together.
It kind of makes Asian American feel like they're like second in place.
What did you mean?
So like when you think of so it goes back to like the whole model minority of like, you guys should be like Asian American, or where stereotypes where, they're hardworking or blah, blah, blah. But it's like, like you said, it kind of disbands us, or like kind of makes Asian Americans feel like they're better than like other minorities, when that shouldn't be the case, because, everyone has a race, but like everyone has their own personalities and may not fit the stereotypes. So we should be judging more on like people's characters rather than their race. Yeah. But it makes us like kind of like say, oh, we're better than like Black people or Hispanics, when we shouldn't really think that way, because at the end of the day, we're all minorities, and we all should all like have each other's backs on this fight against racial injustice.
And then for me as well, for the chapter, she kind of like throws down all these facts. And I was like, I never knew that before. For example, like Filipino Americans on average have a low poverty rate of 6.7%, because she kind of dives into extreme economic disparity. Because, you know, when you think about the model minority myth, like they think that Asian Americans are pretty well off, highly educated, you know, doesn't really face the same type of oppression as the other minorities. But she kind of throws it down and says, actually, for example, Cambodian, Laotian, Pakistani, and Thai American community have a poverty rate of around 18%. And then Bangladeshi and Hmong Americans have poverty rates between 26 and 28%. So I'm like, I didn't realize that. And that was never at the forefront of my mind. Like, I was like, oh shit, like I forgot about all these communities.
And it's easy for us to forget as Asian Americans because we're so surrounded by other Asian Americans that we don't really think about like what the not suffering, but like the disparities of Asian Americans because of our own environment and being around Asian people majority of the time.
Being around well-off Asian American people majority of the time.
There's also point that says everyday discrimination and microaggressions against Asian Americans. The model minority myth puts a lot of pressure on Asian Americans to seem happy with their great success in America and live up to the hardworking and docile image projected onto them. This makes it very hard for Asian Americans to complain about racist microaggressions against them, and makes it even harder for them to be taken seriously when they do. It's harder for us to kind of like even doing this like and complain because we are like, you know, what Black people go through is we're never gonna go through it because we are not Black. But we as Asian Americans too, we still have our own struggles, and we also deserve, you know, that voice or that validation when things get tough too.
And for me, I highlighted specifically the point of like, there's limits on professional success. Like, she kind of said like 63% of Asian American men are feeling stalled in their careers. And actually, Asian Americans make up between 35 to 60% of the workforce in top tech companies like Google and Facebook. So we're located in Silicon Valley, and I'm like, that's true. There was a lot of Asian Americans in Facebook when I was there, but I barely saw any Asian Americans in leadership positions, Asian American men, let alone Asian American women. So I'm like, dude, like, that's right. Like, we might be able to get into tech companies, but I don't see myself, I never see a representation of myself as a CEO or something. And there was also a point about hate crimes against Asian Americans, and especially during COVID, you know, that barely got any news as well. Okay, so there was also a mention of like back in a 2008 survey in the San Francisco Bay Area, 69% of turban wearing Sikh student reported harassment of bullying in a 2008 survey. So right after like 9/11 hit, there was like a lot of violent hate crimes against Islamophobia, and it's just insane. And those are rarely talked about as well.
I think there's a point in the book where she said, what'd she say? Asians and non-Asian people of color must stop believing the hype. We are not in competition for the biggest slice of the white supremacist pie. We will never be free until we all see and value for our own unique culture, history, talents, and challenges.
Yep, I highlight the same thing. Because people, we are in this shit together. We're not fighting each other. There's enough for everybody to go around. I mean, I think I just started to hear about the model minority myth. I know it wasn't talked about. I think it was only like 1 or 2 years ago when I really started understanding what it is. Even when I was talking to my little brother, I was like, have you heard of the model minority myth? He's like, no, what's that? And I just said that like, this is just this fake notion that like they're putting us above the other minorities, and, you know, like, and pitting us against each other. And somehow like oppressing us in a way too, by saying that like, you're supposed to be the the good, quiet ones. I mean, how many times have you heard that in your life? Like, oh, you're an Asian woman, you gotta behave like a lady or something. You're not supposed to speak up, and you're supposed to be docile or subservient. So, like, I've had enough of that as well. And though my voice can get shaky talking about hard stuff, like, I do encourage like whoever is listening, like, to speak up when you see injustice, because we need more of that. Any other parting thoughts, you guys? I know I just want to say I'm really glad that we did this. It's a lot and it's heavy, but I'm proud of us, and we might have messed up, but like I said, we're open to learning.
Like individually for me, I suck at these type of, not necessarily I'm not as articulate as I want to be, but if you want to have the conversation, if you want to talk it out, I'm listening, I'm all ears. Relationship, out of here, you out. Not for me, son.
Yeah, I think this is always going to be an ongoing learning process right now, because even just by reading this book, I'm at least educating myself on like being less fearful of having the conversation. But I know that even if I have the courage to even talk about it, I'm always going to have to push myself to need to talk about it until like I feel more comfortable to say what I want to say about the topic. So it's definitely an ongoing learning experience for me, and I don't think that's ever going to change in terms of the ongoing learning.
Sounds like we're allies here. We're in the corner of against racial injustice, people. Okay, so I didn't mention this earlier, but this is actually our 10th episode of We Just Wanna. And this will be our last episode for season 1, guys. So we'll be taking a short break because Donna's birthday is on July 22nd. And then Carol and my birthdays are in early August. So we're just going to take some break and recuperate and come back stronger for season 2. But of course, we didn't forget about fun fact, but we're going to do something differently this time. So we're going to say fun fact about each other. So,
Okay.
Yeah. Down?
Yeah.
Down.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I am going to say Carol's fun facts. So did you guys know that Carol was in a shoe commercial when she was younger?
We got a star in the house.
We got a star in our house.
To be more specific, this was in Taiwan because my aunt used to be an agent for rising stars or people that want to get into the entertainment industry. So she would help find commercials or small Taiwanese drama series for them to be a part of. And so I used to go to Taiwan during winter break, and then I would stay past New Year's. And so I was in a commercial for New Year's specifically. And so I remember I was really young, so I don't remember what age, but like I was in the back and I was playing like a kid with parents, and then the parents saw like their friends. So it was kind of like just in the background or an extra role rather than like the main role, because there was a main role, but I was like an extra. So that was pretty cool. But I didn't really like sell any shoes. It was just a shoe commercial.
Hey, man.
Wait, what shoe was it?
I don't know how to say it in English, but in Chinese it's called aso pi xie. So it's just ASOS. So
ASOS.
I know
ASOS or something. Yeah,
That's
but then
a big
like
brand.
Is it a big brand? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know it myself. It's so long time ago. But yeah, because like I'm such an extrovert and I love like being outgoing, and I always wanted to get into acting. So because my aunt was an agent, she kind of like wanted to help me get my foot in the door. But then I was so shy, or I'm more like camera shy when it comes to like being outgoing. So I was like really nervous, and then I never really like gone on that path of being in the entertainment industry, just because I was so camera shy. So yeah.
Oh, look at you now. Movie star, now pod star. I see you, sis.
Pod
Or
star.
not movie star, commercial star. But still,
That was only one commercial though.
one commercial more than me.
That's
Yeah,
true.
so
More than me.
yeah, so it was really fun to be a part of that, but I don't think I'm still camera shy to this day. So doing this is like kind of like stepping out of my comfort zone.
Nice, nice. That's cool. That's a
So
definitely fun fact.
so I'll do Donna's, or I'll say Donna's fun fact. So, fun fact about Donna is that her parents owned a school in the Philippines.
Yeah,
Explain
so
yourself.
my parents actually are like sponsors of four different like schools. So two high schools, two elementary schools. Um, my family name is for one of the elementary schools. My family name is on the like gateway. So when you open the gate, it literally says donated by Mr. and Mrs. My parents' name. It has our home address too. But it's our old address. So
Oh.
people look it up. They can't really know where we live. One of the high schools, my mom was a teacher because my parents were both teachers in the Philippines, and that's why they kind of got interested in that. My mom gives like is a monetary sponsor for the school, so she'll invest in the school, and then obviously like she's, I guess, yeah, sponsor, that's the name. Their parents also donated to make a canteen or cafeteria and a computer room at their alma mater or the high school, and the high school that they taught at. They were teaching at the high school they went to together, which is pretty cute. So yeah, it has my parents' names all over that too. And then one more elementary school, actually, I donated to it. It's a second grade classroom. It says donated by Miss Donna Jane Simmeline Salam all over the chalkboard. I met the kids, and the teacher is actually my aunt, or we say family because I think she actually is my family though. But her classroom has my name all over, and they talk about me, and we'll call sometimes, and I'll say hi guys, speaking English to them and all that. So yes, if you go to the Philippines in Cabugao, Ilocos, Philippines, holla at your girl. That's where my family's from.
Aw, that's so cool, Donna. I want to make that my goal to have a classroom named after me.
It's pretty cool. Like when I went recently visited back to the Philippines, my aunt was like, "Oh, do you see that name? You see the name that's always on top of the chalkboard?" And everyone's like, "Yeah." And then my aunt was like, "Oh, that's her." And they're like, "Look at me," and I'm like, oh, "Hello, hi guys, yes, it's me."
You
It's
You're a
pretty
sound so
cool.
celebrity.
famous.
Yeah.
Yeah, my famous is not the same level. It's not TV level, but it's children level. I got you.
Children level? That sounds weird.
Okay. Anyways, speaking of the Philippines and visiting, my girl Liana here actually visited, I think you said 8 countries in the past 2 years. Or
Yeah.
it was.
No, it was fun. I'm a big traveler at heart. And then after I graduated college, I made it my mission to at least visit like one country per year. But it just so happened that, for example, for my graduation trip, I took a trip to Asia. So I went to Thailand, Cambodia, and Malaysia. So, knock off 3 countries at once. And then last year, I also went to Vietnam and Singapore for the first time. And then I also went to France, Netherlands, and Belgium. So it was fun. I think that travel really does, I don't know, you learn more about yourself when you travel. And I do recommend for people who are looking for the next trip after COVID is over to go to Cambodia because it has really rich history and it's dark as well. And it's a developing country. And I know it's not on a lot of people's map yet. And then for Europe, I recommend Amsterdam in the Netherlands because there's a lot of history and art, and the culture is amazing. So yeah, I'm a big, huge traveler at heart, and I miss traveling so much.
Liana's loaded to be able to go to 8 countries within 2 years.
For real. I'm sad I didn't get to come
Dang.
with you to the Europe trip. I think that would have been like fucking crazy if we both went together.
Yes, yes. I
Next
want to
trip
go in the
together. Let's go.
summer. Let's go. Let's go. Yeah.
I'm so down because like the number one country I want to go to is France. It's always been my lifelong
Mm.
dream to go to France, and I'm supposed to take my mom. So that's like a lifelong goal to take my mom to France because that's like the number one place she wants to go to. And that was the whole reason I learned French in junior high and high school, so I can
Oh
be
dang,
able to speak
that
French.
dream is long for you to
Yeah,
Ooh.
have that.
yeah. So it's like, that's why I said it's a lifelong dream, because I literally had that dream or goal for
Forever.
as long as I remember.
Yeah, no, it's totally possible, guys. I mean, I wasn't loaded, just FYI. I was just like, I mean, I just tried to make it happen, and I went in the winter, so tickets were really low. And it was only a week, so I only spent about 2 days in Paris. So of course the Eiffel Tower and all that stuff, and then to get to different countries in Europe is really easy. You take train, so it was only a couple hours away from Belgium and Netherlands, so it's doable. Just budget and think smartly, and there's hostels. There's ways around it.
Yeah, I heard it's like when you go to Europe, like from the US to Europe, that's probably the most expensive part of the trip, or at least the flight
Mhm.
there. And then when
Yeah.
you're going from country to country within Europe, then it's like really easy and cheap.
For sure. Cool. Okay, so we'll wrap things up. We'll miss you guys and stay tuned. I think we'll have our next episode either middle or end of August. Because, like I said, we just want to kind of take the time to reflect and make this a little bit better and just celebrate
And
what we've
celebrate
accomplished.
us.
Yes.
Celebrate us, because it's all
Love.
our birthdays coming up. So
Yes.
Cancers, let's go.
Leos, let's
Leos,
go.
let's go.
I was born one day before the Leo. Shut the fuck up. Just kidding. I'm
I'm
not hating. I'm not hating. I was born in the
I was-
Philippines. Time,
I was
time
looking
difference.
it up of like what month, or not what month, what date for Leos were, and it's like really close to yours. So if you were born
It's
a
literally
few
the
days
next
later,
day.
yeah, you could have been a Leo with us, and I can see you as a Leo too.
Yeah.
Cancers, I
Okay.
still love you. Don't forget that. No, for real. We just want to thank everyone who's been listening so far, for the past 10 episodes. The fact that you're listening to this episode right now, meaning that means you must have listened to the last 9 episodes. So look out for the next 10 episodes again next time.
I also want to thank all of our supporters and listeners who have consistently listened to our 10 episodes so far. You guys are the best, and we appreciate all the comments that you guys have said to us, or either DM'd us privately or not publicly, but publicly, like even comments and stuff. So thank you to you guys for listening, and hopefully we'll keep you along the ride for season 2 and onward. And so we really appreciate you guys, and give us any feedback or topics that you want us to talk about, so that way we can make this better for you to listen to.
Nice.
Alrighty.
Love you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
We just want to.
Wednesdays.
Yes. Oh, good shit. We're not in sync this time.
All
Okay,
right.
bye.
It's okay. Bye.